who knows, Jai Amos might yet win the Coleman medal.
He could do it. He's creeping up on everyone, and I haven't been his hugest fan, but I've certainly come around to, he's so clean.
The thing that we are appreciating with Fremantle, Stevo, and I dare say you agree, is their professionalism. You see them even after the win against Brisbane on the weekend, it's like, yep, that box is ticked, on to the next week.
And we're getting more positive about the Eagles as well. It looks like they're growing up before our eyes, Diggers. With this wild card in the top 10, they're even clinging to hope the Eagles of having a bit of action later in the year.
All in all, I think West Coast fans can now see some light, and it's not an oncoming train.
Well, hi, I'm Mark Stevens, and welcome to Zero Hanger HQ here in Melbourne, in Cremorne, for another episode of the Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. As usual, on the other side of the country, Digby Beacham, that great journo, he's ready to go. Let's bring it on. Well, Diggers, Freo, we've talked them up every week. I've still been a little bit sceptical because the Dockers are the Dockers, and it's hard to get that out of my mind, the history of the club. But after going to Brisbane and putting the Lions away with so much to play for the Lions, even I'm coming around. What was your take on that? It was a massive win.
It's simply professional again, Stevo. Great to chat. Good morning to you. Look, they continue to get it done, don't they, Fremantle? And look, this was the challenge. They hadn't been to the Gabba and won in about a decade. We knew that Brisbane were a little bit vulnerable given the injuries and the form. But Fremantle had their foot on their throat early on, and then in that third quarter there was just distinct separation, professionalism, and it was interesting to hear Josh Dunkley earlier this week talk about Fremantle, saying from a Brisbane perspective it's the best side they've encountered this season. So I think that's a big tick for Justin Longmuir and his men.
Well, they're so even, aren't they? And the three-pronged attack, I mean, who's taking credit for that? To setting this up, because they move to the right spots, don't they? They don't get in each other's way. There's other clubs, you got players flying at similar balls.
Yeah, that's spot on, Steve. And didn't we speak, what was about 13, 14 weeks ago, and we, you know, as a bit of a season preview on the Outer Wing, and we were talking about Fremantle and would Justin Longmuir release the handbrake? Well, I think the answer to that is a definitive yes, and you can understand why, because again, I know we're touching on it, and we seem to touch on it every 7 days, is the weapons forward of centre, and it's not just the three talls, but they're in rare nick, no doubt about that, and Amos, Tracy and Voss, but it's those mid-range and smaller forwards getting to work, their ability, as you said, to work for each other. They defend when they haven't got the ball. They're ticking a lot of boxes. You know, Jai Amos was one that we touched on, didn't we? How was he going? Is he doing enough? He's kicked 30 goals. He's equal fifth with Nick Watson on the Coleman medal leaderboard. Josh Tracy's kicked 28. I think if you were to say Josh Tracy's an All-Australian right now, everyone would agree with you. Who knows, Jai Amos might yet win the Coleman medal.
He could do it. He's creeping up on everyone, and I haven't been his hugest fan, but I've certainly come around to, he's so clean as far as finishing. And the thing about the Dockers, they've got gears, haven't they? They sort of hang around in neutral for a while, go to that old Docker stuff, chip, 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 Luke Ryan type style, and then they just let it go, let it rip.
Yeah, they do. It's a bit of rope-a-dope, isn't it? Like they sit there and they'll be involved in an arm wrestle with you. And we spoke about this 7 days ago, Steve. And then when they slip themselves, they've got gears that not many other sides have got. And to be fair, only one other side has seen it and been able to conquer it this year. That's Geelong in round one. And I think, in fairness, respectfully to the Cats, who are a very good side, there were extenuating circumstances behind that result down there in GMHBA Stadium. So, look, Fremantle, as a unit, as a collective, they've got it all. They really, really have. They've been able to get over some pretty daunting opposition at stages this season, minus some key personnel. We know that Young's missed some football, Serong's missed some football, the skipper Alex Pearce has missed. He was back on the weekend. Very, very good. But all in all, they're building, and they're building to something pretty special.
Yeah, they should have won that game in Geelong. It's a long time ago, but thanks for reminding me. I mean, they were all over the Cats, weren't they? There was just a few little things went wrong. So that was a sign of things to come. They probably should be unbeaten. Now, Bunbury, take us through life in Bunbury footy. What's the ground like, the dimensions, the trip down, Diggers? I assume as a kangaroo, you'd be heading down there with your scarf on to watch the Dockers play down there.
Looking forward to heading down there. Look, Bunbury's about, just under 2 hours southwest of Perth. It's a big country town, but they love their football down there. And one thing we are going to appreciate this weekend, Steve, is some beautiful weather. The forecast for Bunbury is about 19, 20 degrees, light winds. Hands Oval is the ground. It's undergone a massive refurbishment. We saw it last year. We've seen it with the Matildas down there. It's the premier ground in the southwest, and the Southwest Football League. It's the best league outside the Waffle here in this state. So the facilities down there are great. The grounds, it's perfect. Drove past it the other day, actually, and it looks in pristine condition. And look, the weather last weekend was so bad down there in the southwest that they had to cancel a race meeting in Bunbury on Sunday because of wild winds. Winds in the vicinity of 120 kilometres an hour. There will be no excuses this weekend. It is going to be picture perfect for football.
Well, it's ideal for the Dockers, isn't it, travelling down there? You'd think, look, they should get the job done, but North, they're dangerous, aren't they? And we saw them last year galvanise. They made it a bit of a trip away, a boys' trip to Perth.
We all like a boys' trip, but
I've seen you in action.
They were good in their two games. They were good in their two games here, Steve, weren't they? Look, they beat West Coast and they just came up short against Fremantle at Optus Stadium the following weekend. So, look, is it a banana skin game for Fremantle? Possibly. You know, they've got over to Brisbane, then they've got to get back to Perth. They'll drive down, I dare say, in the bus later this week, spend the night down there, get ready for Saturday, and they might have an eye on the bye the following week. But one thing that we are appreciating with Fremantle, Stevo, and I dare say you agree, is their professionalism. You see them even after the win against Brisbane on the weekend, it's like, yep, that box is ticked, on to the next week. They're very, very matter-of-fact at the moment. And
there's selection pressure as well. Hayden Young, the man that you love so much, surely he comes back in, so who misses out?
Well, Matthew Johnson tweaked that hamstring, Stevo, last week against Brisbane, and he was very, very good, wasn't he? He nutted Lockie Neal early and then found some of the football himself. So, look, he's listed as a test, but with the bye upcoming, you would have thought that Fremantle would err on the side of caution there. Some will say they might do the same with Young, but he's in and around training, has been for a couple of weeks, so I'd like to think that Hayden Young's ready to rock and roll. So it might be a like for like there. Brennan Cox is also listed as a test. He knocked that knee last week. We've spoken about his importance to the Fremantle back six. So he's a watch, but Young for Johnson looks to be one, and a bit of a watch on Cox later in the week.
And just finally on the Dockers, I'd like to ask you, Diggers, who would you least like to lose from that team? They have had a pretty good run as far as the top-end talent. Young's been out, but Tracy or Jackson? For me, Jackson is the energiser. He's the guy who's getting it all done. If they lose him with injury, touch wood, that won't happen, but will it derail them?
Well, I'd like to think no, but I'm with you. He's the man at the moment, Luke Jackson. He's in rare nick. Now, if you were to lose Tracy, you've still got two big boppers in Voss and Amos, and two big boppers who are in really good nick. You could bring in, say, an Oscar McDonald. You could poke him down there, and all of a sudden you've still got those three tall forwards in that system that you like. If Luke Jackson was to go down, touch wood, that's not the case. Then it rests with Sean Darcy, who we did see back in the Waffle on the weekend, which is good, and Mason Cox, but they're not Luke Jackson. So yes, I'm with you. Luke Jackson is the one.
Well, Diggers, that's a Freo. They should get the job done this week down in country WA. That'll be a big game. Now, West Coast, and we're getting more positive about the Eagles as well. It looks like they're growing up before our eyes, Diggers. That's the feeling over here, that just more consistent through games.
Yeah, 100%, Steve. Look, we spoke about them 7-8 weeks ago and we thought, well, geez, where they're at? Are they the worst side in the competition? You know, that was off the back of that really disappointing home defeat to Richmond. But since then, they've been very, very good. And the 3-week block that they've been able to put together, they beat the Giants. Since then, the Giants have found some of that, orange tsunami form, haven't they? They've been brewing against, obviously, Brisbane and then in the Red Centre against Melbourne on the weekend just gone. So they knocked them off. They went toe-to-toe with Collingwood, and who knows, with the rub of the green there, they might have even caused one of the great upsets. And then over here in what was a game that we were touting as a danger game, weren't we, 7 days ago, they did a number on Essendon. I know it was only 5 or so goals in the end, but it could have been 8, 9, 10 goals had West Coast taken all their opportunities. They were very, very efficient.
They were, and cyclonic conditions over there, had it been a still dry day, West Coast could have won that by anything. I just think that evened it up. What was it like there at the footy? The ball seemed to be spinning in weird ways. It was probably the worst game of footy I've ever seen, but there were reasons for it. I mean, with the weather over there.
Yeah, it was wild, Stevo. It was really, really wild. Look, there wasn't a lot of rain at that stage, but Saturday night, Sunday morning here in Perth and also the southwest, there was roofs being taken off buildings and there was cars being moved. There was flooding. It was probably fortunate that this game was at Optus Stadium, which is enclosed because it's the new, world-class venue as opposed to an open ground like a Subiaco or, heaven forbid, a old suburban ground in Victoria. It might not have gone ahead.
Well, lucky we weren't in Bunbury last week. Probably would have got blown away. But there's no way it would have gone ahead, Diggers.
It was wild. Put it this way, it was lucky it wasn't out the old Western Oval back in the mid-90s when West Coast used to go out there and get a touch-up from your Footscray boys. But
the home of footy.
It was wild.
Yeah, God's country, that one. Of course, remember Michael Gardner getting touched up there, the guys going to him. That was a great era, Diggers. But back to reality a bit. You look at the 3-week block they've put together. They're looking pretty good with the fixture coming up, Port and North. Nobody's really... Look, I don't think it can happen, but people are talking up Carlton as a wild card possibility. With this wild card in the top 10, they're even clinging to hope the Eagles of having a bit of action later in the year.
Well, whether they get there or not, I would say no. One thing that's going to hurt them is their percentage. Their percentage is still pretty poor and they've got a fair bit of ground to make up in that department. But what we are seeing, it would seem, Stevo, is that West Coast finally, and there's been a couple of false dawns along the way, hand on heart now, I think West Coast are out the other side. I really do. Like, they won one game last year. One game. They were terrible. But now they've won 4 already. They're halfway through the year. They've got some winnable games on the horizon. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But all in all, I think West Coast fans can now see some light and it's not an oncoming train.
Yeah, well, I think, look, can they get Port? I think it's a bad week to get Port. They're rested up. They've had a bye. Yeah. They've had a look at what they're doing. They still have a crack Port. They lack a lot of talent and they've got obviously Rosie out. But it's going to be tough. I think we'll learn a lot about the Eagles this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. And look, West Coast went over to Adelaide Oval early this year, didn't they? And they got the job done in a thriller. So that's going to hold them in good stead, you would think. But I'm with you a little bit here. I'm thinking that maybe Port rested. They've still got some wow factor, haven't they? And when they go Port, they can really go quickly. But look, West Coast will be well within their rights to think this is a very, very winnable game at home. And if that's the case, that gives them 5 on the season at the halfway point, and I dare say a great deal of self-belief, which has perhaps been lacking, and that's understandable given some of the pummelings that they've received. Yeah,
it's good to see the Eagles up and about. I wasn't sure about that Richmond Guernsey last week, Diggers. What was that all about? I know it's the state colours, but come on.
West Australian black and gold. It's a WA Day weekend it was. It was our public holiday. The Fremantle fans and the Fremantle Football Club don't like it either, so they're in your corner, but... yeah. I must admit, to see that black and gold jumper, I love it. And I'm not even an Eagles supporter, but I'm a proud West Australian, so I'm have to go head-to-head with you there.
Yeah, I agree with that, but living in Richmond and Tigerland here in Melbourne, they weren't happy because it didn't make sense. But not a lot makes sense in footy at times, and we're going to see heritage jumpers coming up in the next week or so. I think there's even one coming up this weekend. So Ruben Ginbey, the man with the blonde hair, he's always looked good. I think he's starting to deliver.
Yeah. Look, he's a ripper, Ruben. And look, we've spoken about it a few times. Who would have wanted to be a defender in the last 3 or 4 years at West Coast? Like, you saw a lot of ball and some of the requirements placed upon you because of the lack of pressure further afield from your teammates was diabolical. Like, it was dire. And Ruben has often been asked to take on the opposition's best big key forward, and he's done very well. And saying that, he's not a small man, but he is undersized for that role. And his effort on the weekend against Nate Caddy was terrific. He's a runner-up in the John Worsfold medal 12 months ago. He's a leader. He's immensely popular. He's brave to a fault. Like, he ticks so many boxes, and as West Coast continue to grow and hopefully get some bigger bodies and some more experience down there in that defence I'm talking about, I think Ruben will get even better and better. And look, he hasn't always been a great user of the ball. He doesn't kick the ball over great distance. He's more of a chipper at that 45, but he used the ball particularly well, and he knows his limitations now, I think, Ruben. So he was outstanding. He's having another really good season, and it's great to see.
Well, he's obviously high profile. I mean, what's he like in Perth now? Is the legend growing? Is he a man about town? He's got the hair and the look. Is he strutting around Burswood and these sort of places?
No, look, he's a country boy. He's from Dunsborough, which is another sort of 45 minutes further southwest on the coast there from Bunbury. But he likes life in the city, but he's a pretty matter-of-fact young man. As I said, he's really, really popular within the four walls. He's a future leader. He's already seen as a really key member of the leaders at West Coast, and you can see why. So he's a beauty, but he's not ever go. And anyone who's coaching, you talk to coaches or coached him underage football, and they rave about him. He's a really level-headed young man. Never ever will Ruben Jimby get a big head. He's a beauty.
Well, that's good to hear, Diggers. He's going places. Brandon Starcevic, been a lot talked about him. Hasn't really had a chance to get on the park at all over there. Chance this week?
Yeah, he'll play, which is great. So, West Coast invest a lot of money over a long period for Brandon at the back end of last year. That deal was done a long way out. So he's had some issues with his body, not so much the concussions, but more so soft tissue injuries. But he got through some managed minutes on the weekend here in the waffle. So he'll play, and he's going to be really important in the back half of the season for West Coast, because you know what you're going to get from Brandon Starcevic. Ultra professional, a level of reliability, dependability, leadership. For a side which has lacked a little bit of leadership, Brandon Starcevic is going to be absolute gold.
All right, Diggers, then give us a tip in this one. It's one of those 50-50 games in the tipping. I'm with Port. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm with Port as well. Just the fact that sides off a break and you get a chance to really dissect your opposition. I'm thinking Port, just perhaps in a little bit further advanced state than what West Coast are, so I'll lean towards Port. But again, like we said last week with Brisbane and Fremantle, it wouldn't be a shock if the WA side prevailed.
Well, that's the Eagles wrapper on Outer Wing. Now, next, Diggers, some news.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about. What are you really gambling with?
Caleb Serong, how's he pulled up after that trip? And he's gone halfway around the world just to do a bit of cheerleading over there, and then apparently see a calf specialist that's so good that nothing like that can be matched in Perth, obviously, that he's flown thousands of kilometres.
Jeez, it's upset some of you people over on the East Coast, this, hasn't it? Oh, Caleb, he got on the plane, he went and saw a specialist, a needle specialist over there in Brisbane, and it's the end of the earth, according to some. Look, I would have thought, Stevo, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Fremantle and their sports science staff and their medical team would have a better understanding of how Caleb's tracking than you and I and those in the media. And knowing full well that Caleb was never going to play this weekend against North Melbourne and Bunbury, then they have the bye. I would have thought it's a perfect opportunity to get Caleb on a plane, get him over there, see a specialist, and make sure that you dot your I's, you cross the T's, you do everything you possibly can in his rehab so that he's ready to rock and roll in the back half of the year. Well, this is an A-grade player, one of their best players, one of the premier midfielders in the competition, and I would have thought they've done everything right by Caleb Serong in order to get him performing at his optimum in the back half of 2026.
It's a slight red flag for me, though, that he needs some special treatment. If it's a standard calf, stay at home, rest up, come back after the bye. This needle guy, Jimmy Bostock, mate, he must be a guru. I mean, they all travel there, so fingers crossed that it works, Diggers.
Oh, well, I think it will. Well, I don't know if it will. I hope it will. I assume it will. You don't go and visit a specialist if he's no good or you need some assistance. But look, we see Darcy Moore this week jet off to the USA. clubs, they're always looking to exploit and or explore everything they can, aren't they, in regards to player personnel. As we say, Stevo, the greatest ability in this game, in professional sports, is availability. And one thing Caleb Serong throughout his career has been is durable. He's had a little nick in the calf. He's missed some football. And I would have thought that Fremantle being extremely diligent and really responsible in order to getting him back on the field soon. And when he does get back, he's ready to rock and roll.
All right. Now, this is usually Digger's List. This is a bit of a twist on this new segment, Diggers. I'm going to go with Digger's Crystal Ball. Now, you've done your sums. I'm going to put you under the pump here. This is win-losses at the end of the year. Wins-loss for both clubs in Perth. So you've done the sums. Give me the end result for Freo.
Are you sitting down?
Yes. Oh, you're going through unbeaten from here?
No. I'm giving them 2 losses on the way in. I've got the minor premiers, Stevo, 20-3.
That's not bad. Who are they going to lose to?
Well, it's probably, they've got North and then they've got the bye. And then they've got a 4-game patch. They've got Geelong, Gold Coast, GWS, who look like they're clearing their throats, and then Sydney. So it's a really testing 4-game stretch. But Stevo, 3 of those games are at home. They get the Cats at home after a bye. So they'll be fresh. They get, they'll have all of their personnel there. Young will be there. Serong will be there. Then they get Gold Coast here. Well, they should beat Gold Coast here. Gold Coast don't travel all that well. And they also get Sydney here. Like I would have thought, if right here, right now, if you frame your market with TABtouch against Geelong, Gold Coast and Sydney, Fremantle will be favourites. So will they drop one of them? Probably. Then they've got a couple of games away later in the year, the dead of winter. You've got Port in Adelaide, and we know that can get really cold and bleak over there. And they've also got Melbourne at the MCG later in the year as well. But look, which games they're going to lose, I'm not entirely sure, but they're not going to win out from here. So I've got them 20-3 and finishing on top of the ladder, and dare say that they'll continue to be TABtouch premiership favourites. Yeah,
minor premiers, Diggers. The only reservation, I think they'll get it done. But of course, Gold Coast rolled them over there in a final last year, so they travelled well that night. But I don't think Gold Coast are going too well at all. They're a club, I think, that's just got a little bit ahead of themselves, the Suns, after what happened last year. What about West Coast? You've done the figures, one win last year. What's your formula at the end of the year for the Weagles?
Well, I've got them 7-16, Stevo. So look, it's further advancement that requires them to win a further 3 games for the year. But again, the next like Fremantle, they've got a big 4-week block upcoming. They've got games against Port, North Melbourne, Carlton, and Adelaide. And the Adelaide game's home. We know Carlton game's over there in Melbourne. But they get North Melbourne here at Optus Stadium. So, again, if they can pinch a couple of those, they also get Richmond later in the year. We saw what Richmond did over here, so they'd love to be able to exact some level of revenge against the Tigers. And we know the Tigers are really banged up at the present stage. But on the path that they're on at the moment, West Coast, there are games which they're going to be really, really competitive in. Even got Collingwood over here later in the year. So we saw what happened a couple of weeks ago at the MCG before a rabid Collingwood crowd. So, look, I might have even sold them a little bit short, but 7-16 is the crystal ball for me with West Coast this year.
Yeah, 7 wins would be a good result given what they've dished up in recent times. Now, Diggers, let's give us a fill-up on behalf of TABtouch. Real Punters Play here. Couple of bets to write down for this weekend.
Okay, so we'll start with the North Melbourne Fremantle game down there at Hands Oval in Bunbury, Steve. And I'll have Jordan Clark and Colby McKercher to get 20+ possessions, Nick Larkey to kick 1 goal for the Kangaroos, and Jai Amos, who we've touched on this morning, to kick 2+ goals. That's $3.95.
That's good. I reckon there'll be some cheapies there between, what was it, McKercher and Clark?
McKercher and Geordie Clark.
Oh, that's a cheapie. That's a cheapie fest. I mean, it's 1-2 City Central for those 2 guys. So they'll cover that off. I think that's a good bet, Diggers. What about in the other game?
Okay, so there's $2.90 on offer about Jake Waterman to get 10+ disposals and also to kick 2+ goals. And he's in really good nick, Jake, it must be said. He's kicked 25-32 for the year, so he's going along particularly well. So I'm going to roll that same game multi into Jason Horne-Francis to get it 20 and also kick 1+ goal. So that's $2.90. So just repeating that, Jake Waterman, 10+ disposals, 2 goals. Jason Horne-Francis, 20 touches and 1 goal.
Yeah, I like it, Diggers. Thanks for joining us again this week. It's been good fun. Enjoy your trip down to Bunbury. You got the scarf, you got the North Jocks on ready to go as well?
I do have the North jumper, Stevo.
That's good. I like the short sleeve. I'd like to see you down there. We might run a photo.
You don't need to see my guns.
In next week's show. So thanks for joining us on the Outer Wing for TABtouch. Real Punters Play here. We'll see you next week.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.